I've had intro videos too. Aha, there we go. We're live. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Morning News Show. And this is the healthcare edition. This is awesome. We got Deanie Taylor in the house. Woo woo. All right. We were just chatting before the show went live about the NIH and all the stuff that's happening with Elon Musk and all those great things. So we'll that'll be our top story for today. You know, it's always so much fun when people can't pay their bills because, you know. So, all right. So talk about it. For those of you that don't know, the cost cutting measure is that I guess the universities were getting grants.
Right.
And part of their grants is they were allowed to do overhead or something, right, for the grants. And now they're limiting that because other places have 15% limits in overhead or something like that. So do you know what does it mean, Deanie?
Well, as it relates to real estate, rent is in the overhead. And so to the extent the grants do not cover any or a very small portion of overhead, it impacts rent. And so some of these locations for the uses of that grant money, if they're in facilities not owned by the university or not in any way associated with the university, rents due, and that has an impact on them. Now, there are leases in place that will be impacted if the landlord can't collect the rent. I think these research projects still get done. They may have to move the locations. Universities may have to change kind of the thinking, but I'm not sure this is a long-term thing.
Really?
So I would be surprised if there's a mass change in where the research is being done. And this would primarily affect life science type facilities, not medical, say outpatient medical buildings. This would primarily be life science where you've got research going on. And we'll just have to wait and see. I think this is getting a lot more press than perhaps what it really means at the local level within a building. And I don't know the timing of when these grants would be stopped versus when the money's already been received and taken and paying toward the overhead.
Yeah, right. So there's a lag a little bit.
Yeah,
So
I would imagine there's a lag, and it's not like they're locking the doors next week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably not. But it's interesting that nothing is escaped the budget scalpel, right? I mean,
right. But I would tell you, and this goes beyond real estate. It has been very interesting, though, to know what we didn't know of where some of this money's been going. I mean, some of these things
were ridiculous.
No matter how you look at it, make no sense. So I think exposing all of this, whether we continue to pay it or not, is a good thing. And then to hear that many of these areas of the government have never passed an audit in the past many, many years that's significant. I think that's an issue that ought to be addressed.
Yeah, it's like, what is the GAO for? Like, I mean, like, why are they there other than to get paychecks? Because no one does anything when they issue out this, their reports. They report and they report and they report, and nobody does anything.
Right. No, I think that I would worry more about the government leases.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And the potential of those being impacted.
Yeah.
Because many of those leases, especially older leases, has in there an appropriation clause that says basically if there's no appropriation, there is no lease.
Right.
And to the extent these audits and reviews stop the appropriation that pays the rent, I think that's more significant than perhaps some of this grant discussion going on. Because there are a lot of GAO leases across many markets, especially in DC, that the government doesn't own the building, a landlord does, and they have government leases, GAO leases, and that could be significant.
Yeah. So there could be a little bit of a real estate recession in DC. I mean,
well, I'm not calling it that yet. But you have a president that knows real estate, knows all of that, and knows somebody's adding up, I'm sure, all the lease commitments, saying, let's cut it by X%.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Figure out what's essential or non-essential, and then let's I mean,
if we are laying off or giving severance to thousands of government employees, it wouldn't surprise me that we will be perhaps terminating leases and throwing the keys back, saying we don't need that building.
Yeah, for sure. This should be a little bit of a restructuring on that end too.
Yes.
It's definitely an interesting time to be in DC and this whole thing. I can't imagine though, but look, I think the stories I read, people admitted, yes, there was waste and fraud in it. And you throw enough money at anything, somebody's going to figure out how to defraud it. Right. I mean, it's just, this good old American way, but, which is sad. But there's always bad actors. I think it's talking about, if you want to equate it to even remember the clean energy stuff, there was somebody that came out that was putting fraudulent solar panels on people's homes, and they got all of this grant money to do that, like millions of dollars. And they were like pieces of plastic that were sticking on people's homes that did not generate any energy at all. Like, and I was just like, oh my God. So I get there's fraud. I get there's waste. I just can't imagine. Oh, look, we got somebody watching us. Yeah, look at that. No, they're commenting. Hey, John, thanks for watching the show. And so he's talking about the same thing you're saying, is that millions of square feet of office space in DC will definitely be impacted too, right? I can't.
Very well.
Yeah. I can imagine that. It's weird because Elon wants everybody to return to work, but I guess he only wants the right people to return to work, or I don't know.
There's fewer people returning to work, given that they were all offered severance. There's no need to come. I mean, by definition, there were thousands that took that, so they're not coming back. So that reduces the space need, if it's in a specific building or a location. But going back, the fraud's one thing, but I think the other thing that's been highlighted is even the approval of real projects. Some of the real projects make no sense. They're not fraud. They just don't make sense to be putting money in it.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting to me. I mean, the fraud should stop in all the programs, but it's the programs that supplied the appropriate information and we gave money to it. And when you look at it, it goes, why are we doing that? And I don't want to go into the examples, but some of them are just ridiculous.
Well, don't stop the honeybee. I like the bees. Come on. The bees are good. The bees are good. We need it for the farmers. The bees are awesome. Okay.
All right.
No, I know. I'm sure there were some more ridiculous than that. I haven't seen all the examples. I did hear about some people that were from a former president's family getting millions of dollars. And, I did hear about that. And I hear, and I think that was all USAID stuff, but it's interesting for sure. But I'm all for transparency and nobody likes it. And I've been through an audit, I've been through several audits before as a small business owner, and you're having to justify every expense, and it's flipping painful, and it's gross, and it's disgusting. And if you don't have the documentation behind I've been through a couple of IRS audits. IRS, please don't come knocking on my door.
But they should do that in these departments of the government.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
should be
why
doing.
wouldn't you? It
Yeah.
just, I mean, it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense that they've been going year after year without addressing an audit in any way.
Yeah, or if they don't pass, having some sort of, corrective measures or something like that, that they have to report to somebody. But if nobody's watching the hen house, right, the fox are going to throw a party. I mean, it just is what it is. I mean,
Right.
yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting exercise for sure. It's, I guess, overdue. But we'll see. There was talk today. I can't remember who I was watching CNBC about we're somehow 5 states away from mandating a balanced budget. Like there's like most of the states have this amendment where every budget has to be balanced,
Right.
and then Idaho and Montana just passed it. Apparently, I didn't have it, and then there's like 5 more states that have to have a balanced budget, and then the states. Every state in the U.S. will have to have balanced budgets in government, which I find interesting. And then they, if the U.S. does it too, can you imagine? Holy crap!
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
It'll be painful the first few years because
Yes.
you really have to address it. But
I
at
know.
some point, this government budgeting is kind of absurd.
Yeah, it's like it's like just disciplining a 3-year-old in the middle of a temper tantrum. I mean, it's kind of what it looks like to me. It's like if you've been a parent and you're like, okay, I've been through this.
Well, I think the thing to watch is whether or not we see a significant impact on leases
Yeah.
in buildings that the government is the primary tenant, because I think they will get to those eventually.
So and then what happens, right? And so you'll have more office space that's vacant, or you'll have, I mean, it'll be repurposing stuff.
That's the way the market works.
Exactly. I know. It's interesting. More offices will turn into apartments.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
they're all going to turn into hospitals. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, we don't need more hospitals either, really.
We don't. Talking about hospitals, or universities. Okay, so you have to explain this to me. So UCLA,
Right.
God bless them, bought 3 medical office buildings, right? And this is a strategy. Like, is this something? Is this a trend, or they're just out shopping for buildings in their?
No. Well, first of all, you have to know they bought the hospital from HCA.
Okay.
So they had a reason to look at the medical buildings associated with that hospital. That's the first thing.
Okay.
So they bought the hospital. The second thing is, and it's not unusual for UCLA, they own many, many medical buildings around their camp. They prefer to own them because they have money, they have a balance sheet, and they can afford it. Okay. The other thing is there are tax advantages for the not-for-profits to own these buildings. Not pay property taxes, all the things that if you own a building or if my company owns a building, we pay property taxes.
I know.
And so the other thing is I've talked to UCLA several times. They see owning their own buildings as basically paying themselves rent based on whatever's in there and not paying somebody else. They can control the increases. And as long as they have capital to keep them up. The other thing is, remember, this is California and all of the seismic requirements. And UCLA has a unique situation where they require any building they lease or own to meet all of the required seismic codes. So it's easier for them to own it and make sure it meets it than depending on a landlord who's got to do all the stuff. So all of those reasons make perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why? And they've obviously, there must be tenants in those buildings now anyway, associated with that hospital. And they may have other uses and stuff to put in there. So it didn't, and it's called reverse monetization because at the same time, we've got some large health systems selling buildings they own.
Right. Exactly.
Which is a monetization. I mean, if we want to get into terminology.
Yeah. But are they doing are they actually, is it like a sell lease back? Like, is that what
there's I won't mention who, but there's a large health system that has a portfolio of buildings, and they are doing a sale lease back. What that does is it allows them to generate a significant amount of capital if that's how they want to deploy that capital from the buildings. And they will commit to a certain lease term in those buildings. And I'm sure there are many buyers looking at that portfolio, and it'll be interesting. It's been almost 10 years ago. I did something similar at Physicians Realty Trust, where we bought 60, 70 buildings from a large health system because they needed to shore up the balance sheet and needed capital. And they were credit worthy enough that we felt comfortable that the leases that were being signed would be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I don't know if you'll have to. Does UCLA get to do the whole depreciation thing? Like they own
the buildings.
They own the buildings, so they're getting like no taxes. They get to depreciate. This is like a good deal. Let's start a university and go buy buildings.
This is a small piece of what UCLA does.
I'm just kidding.
Because I would tell you the cost of all this seismic requirements is a capital need it makes perfect sense what they're doing. Now, if it was a health system, I mean, there is a reason. If you think about the original owner of that hospital, it was HCA. HCA did not own those buildings. HCA's model is many times to allow the landlord, some other owner, to own the buildings and manage those, because they don't want to do leasing to the third-party tenants and physicians and all that kind of stuff. It just depends. It's every health system has their own strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But
talking about troubled tenants. So Medical Properties Trust has to go get a loan, and it's not small. I mean, know. Who makes that? What's the bat phone? Who can call up and go, hey, I need $2.5 billion. Like, I mean, do they like that? That's cool.
When you have lots of assets,
and
you have a little bit of credibility, and the lenders believe that they will get paid, you can work it out. Now, you saw the rates were not real competitive. They
were really high.
If your credit is bad, the rate is probably high, and it is. But they've had now 2 big tenants go bankrupt, and those tenants were paying rent, and they have to borrow money to make the difference.
That's crazy. Yeah. So we're talking about Medical Properties Trust, and they went out and got a $2.5 billion loan because another tenant declared bankruptcy. So it's interesting to see, is the shift, I mean, that was just, I don't know what it is. Is it the concern around Medicare and Medicaid? And it's not that they were just not operating well. They're just bad operators, the tenants, or no?
The 2 health systems are owned by private equity. We've got the whole discussion that goes on about private equity owning hospitals.
That's true.
And not putting capital in those hospitals or taking lots of cash flow out of those hospitals. And eventually, if you can't pay your bills, you're bankrupted. And 2 health systems have done that. Now, there may have been some hospitals in some markets that couldn't make it because of payer mix, but that's typically not the issue.
No.
Private equity knows what the payer mix is when they buy a hospital. Yeah. So there was nothing left to pay rent.
Well, that's not good. Yeah.
No.
And I'm sure they left him and gave him a long leash, like they hadn't paid rent in a while or something.
I'm sure there was some of that. And if you remember, there's been a history of Medical Properties Trust lending money to the hospitals so they could turn around and pay their rent.
Yeah, so that's true.
That got them into a quandary with the Steward hospitals.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That was not good. It's not. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be a shareholder in that trust at the moment. I guess they're not.
Their stock is not what it was. No.
That's crazy town. So let's talk about markets where there's like obviously, not enough medical buildings. I don't know. I guess it's like migration, or it's all follows
Right.
people's heads, right? And so there was a story about Dallas
Yeah.
can't find, they need doctors. They can't find them. They're looking under rocks to find doctors. And but are there other markets in the U.S. like that?
Yeah, I would tell you it's the typical Sun Belt. If you look at the Southeast and the Southwest, where population is growing quickly, I would put Atlanta in that market.
Yeah.
Certain areas of Florida are in that market. Arizona, all around Phoenix. There's a lot of medical growth because of the population moving. But Dallas, definitely, Dallas has grown such that it basically could be in Oklahoma. I mean, there are people living across the border, driving to Dallas for work, and so and that has caused the medical providers to expand, and they need medical buildings to make that happen, and many times they're doing this and putting in freestanding emergency departments and other things instead of building actually large hospitals so that the patients can be referred to existing hospitals. But Dallas is growing significantly.
Yeah.
They just keep spreading out where there's land, and they just keep filling it up. And that's why I'm saying there are people crossing the border in Oklahoma to go to work in Dallas.
That's crazy. I know it is mind boggling. I mean, somebody was saying the other day, Sherman was a suburb of Dallas. And I was like, Sherman is an hour and a half away, but it's a suburb of Dallas. I mean, because if you look at it, like, it's amazing to me how much that place has grown. And it's, obviously it's good to be in Texas, and that's great. But Dallas there's something in the water up there. Everybody wants to move to Dallas, so I don't know. It's a great thing.
I don't either, but it is growing significantly, and so is Atlanta. Atlanta's doing the same thing.
Yeah,
it won't be long where Chattanooga won't know if it's in Tennessee or Georgia because it'll be part of Atlanta.
That's crazy to me. How close is that? How far is it?
That's a 2.5 hours, but Atlanta is pulling from North Georgia straight up 75.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And I know there's been talk, and this is another Texas town, but this whole like Austin, San Antonio becomes the next DFW, like a big megaplex or metroplex or whatever. And I think that might get there. It's still pretty far away, but but it seems like I-35 is just becoming.
You could just fill in that gap, and it could be like Dallas Fort Worth. Yes.
Yeah, and it probably will get there at some point. I just. And then, the services, but it's so to talk about these metroplexes, and they're getting bigger, and so to service the healthcare needs, people they look to obviously medical office buildings and emergency ambulatory things. You don't want to go plop a hospital in lots of different places, right? So, are the systems? I'm assuming so. The bigger hospital systems, just a question, do they work together or no? They just go plan and do their things, or are they working? Is there
they typically would compete to serve a market.
Okay.
So let's see. Hayes County, if I remember, is is sitting in what we're talking about.
Yes.
And years ago, Ascension out of Austin went that direction, and Tenet was already down there. So they're competing. They're all going after a market. Now I don't know who from San Antonio may have went north to look at that, but occasionally there'll be some coordination, but many times it's where there's a real difference in services. Maybe a children's hospital and an adult acute hospital will work together, things like that. But if a health system's trying to grow their market, they're really not working with somebody else.
Well, so it's not like a bank, right? Like, you're competing, but it's like healthcare. Like, you would think that, you have I don't know, but maybe I'm crazy. You're laughing at me, Deanie.
Well,
I don't know.
You need the patients that have the right payer mix to make a margin.
That's true.
And if you don't compete, I don't know how you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just think that I don't know. I'm sure there's. I don't know where I'm going with this. I thought I was going somewhere. Maybe I don't even know where I'm going. What I'm talking about, Willis. Yeah, but I don't know. So
Let me
if
give you
there
another
was
example.
somebody
For
has, well, I'm
years,
trying to think. Yeah, go ahead.
for years, Baylor and Scott and White competed
Oh yeah,
in Dallas, from Dallas all the way south.
right.
They eventually merged,
Mm-hmm.
or Baylor bought Scott and White. I call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
They didn't work together. They had to merge because they were competing. So this doesn't work just to say let's be kind and nice to each other, because that doesn't work.
Okay. No, I was thinking like some people have better specialties than others.
Oh no, that's true. That's true.
Okay.
And they could bring services to a market.
Right.
For example, they may not want to duplicate cardiology, and so the HCA hospital in Austin might send cardiology and do cardiology in some of those markets where someone else wouldn't do that.
Right.
But that's because the other system doesn't want to spend the capital to compete.
Okay. All right. I got
I
you.
don't know that I'd call it a friendly situation. It's just they don't have the money.
Oh, okay. All right. So, do you think this year there'll be a lot of mergers and acquisitions in healthcare?
I think the door is open for it. From everything I read, the FTC is not going to be as strict about stopping mergers.
Okay.
The question will be if the health systems see a real advantage in the use of their capital, because typically in a merger, one of them is saying we'll provide the capital to the other to do various things. I don't know that we're going to see that type stuff versus the systems just competing with each other for market share. But I don't think the government's going to slow it down like they have been in the past several years. Yeah. So the door is open to do that. And we'll just have to wait and see if it makes sense.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I guess when you have people that have, people filing bankruptcy and then that doesn't go well, you would think that somebody's eyeing that and going, maybe there's a play there. There's always, people looking for a distressed deal here or there.
Just remember, those two bankruptcies are not representative of the healthcare system.
No, I know they're not.
They are not.
No, they're not. Generally, y'all do the healthcare is done really well. I mean, it's like one of the things, right? Yeah. It's
not a high margin business, but it meets and exceeds the needs of patients in many markets. But those two bankruptcies aren't an indication of what's to come from a lot of health systems. They went bankrupt for different reasons.
So does the healthcare industry expand this year? Does it stay the same? Does it just
Well, it depends on what we're talking about expanding. If you're talking about the cost of care going up, sure, it's going to go up, and it's already shown that. If you're talking about caring for more people, yes, in certain markets there's that. And I think the technology and the development of new ways of treating patients and stuff, all that's growing. Yeah. Are hospitals going to make more margin? I doubt it. I think everybody will be happy if they can hold on to what they've got.
Yeah. That's interesting. A friend of mine who had to have brain surgery went to the hospital. Like something was going on. He was having headaches or what. He had brain surgery like a while back, right? Went to the hospital because he was having headaches and it wouldn't go away. And, he'd had brain surgery before. So they're like, hello, go to the hospital, right? His bill was insane. It was an emergency room visit. They admitted him. They did the MRI. They looked at stuff and they said, oh yeah, you're okay. $120,000 that his insurance had to pay.
Yeah. It's a whole nother show to talk about pricing in healthcare. That is, no one would say it makes any sense at all unless they're on the inside and understand what's going on. But you are correct. It doesn't. It's shocking when you see those numbers.
Yeah, I know. And well, look, they're going to make their money, right? I get it. I'm sure it's not an 80% margin.
No.
I mean, the equipment's expensive and there's all this different stuff. And they were using MRI machines. And of course, he had all the fancy equipment on his head, right? I get it. It's still, I'm like,
Just remember this, that for the most part, the pricing is set based on what it costs, obviously,
right.
but also all of the free care that the hospitals give. Somebody has to pay for that.
That is true.
And so
That is true.
prices get inflated to cover those types of services. Otherwise, you would not have hospitals covering those who don't have any way to pay. So that's the fallacy of how pricing is done in healthcare. There isn't a significant element of pricing that covers indigent care. Somebody has to pay for that.
Yeah. So when
you talk the shortage with Medicare or not really Medicare, but Medicaid.
Yeah.
Medicaid doesn't cover costs. So again, you have to make that up somewhere. So you need to pay a little more for your health care.
So in the payer mix, obviously indigent care is a part of it. So how much is it, what's a good percentage? What do we think? It's not 50% of people.
No. I mean, unless it's a really unique situation where it is a hospital that really is dedicated in that market for indigent care. It depends. It could be anywhere from 5 to 15%. I mean, and depending on the volume, it could be a significant number.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy. It can be, that's 15% of people not paying you. That could put people out of business. I mean, if you have 15% people not paying you, especially if they're doing the really expensive stuff and they're not paying you.
Well, I mean, you can equate it to other industries where if you give things away, you don't get paid for it. You will go out of business unless you charge more somewhere else to make up the difference.
Right. No, I got you there. So when you're looking at, there's a local group that won an award,
right?
The latest award in,
we just had several awards given out. Every year we do this.
Yes.
For the types of medical development and different things. Yes.
Yeah. So this medical office building went. So what was the fancy thing about the design? Why did they win an award? I was trying to understand it and didn't.
Well, I mean, it fits into the marketplace for the types of exterior materials they use. It's not, and they do it by categories. So I think this was less than 25,000 square feet category. So it's like 12 or 13,000 square feet. And it had urgent care, imaging, typical small facility that has primary care type services. And but it used materials and was efficient the way it was laid out. And these awards are given, they compare it to other new developments, and that's it. I mean, when you say, why is it unique? Well, it's unique because it was compared to 4 or 5 others and it stood out. I mean, it's not saying it's unique to 1,000 in the United States. It's not that kind of unique. I mean, you got to know how that award's done.
That's true.
They have 5 or 6 that are nominated and they pick the unique one.
So it was layouts, it was materials.
And materials. And I know the company well. I know many of the people there. That's an important thing right now, especially if you're looking at costs of using the right materials at an affordable price. Otherwise, the rents are too high.
Yeah.
And and the design, all of that for the layout made it unique compared to the 3 or 4 that were in that category.
So let's talk about, so you're doing development. So for those of you who don't know, Deanie builds medical buildings. So that's what he does. You're the CEO of Landmark.
That's right. Landmark Healthcare. Yes.
Landmark Healthcare. Okay. So let's talk about the whole tariff thing and the supply chain shortages that are about to ensue. Well, we're trying to take over Panama, so hopefully that'll help. Who knows? I don't know this guy. What is you know? Well, you know, if we take over Greenland, maybe something will happen. No, I'm just kidding. But so the tariffs. How do you see that impacting the healthcare?
Well, I think if we really do have it on steel and some other things that are coming in, the cost of construction, not just in medical, but all construction, could go up. I mean, significantly. Again, as we've already seen with some of the tariffs proposed and then delayed, I'm not sure we're going to really see long term what we're all worried about. I think this is positioning of the U.S. by the president to say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, this is what's going to happen. And but at this point, many construction sites are trying to order in advance to get ahead of some of this. That's one thing you can do. But if these tariffs are actually in place when we need steel, it'll be more expensive.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to all become creative about what else can you use and design that in some way lowers costs. I mean, sometimes that's what creates uniqueness and gets creative about new development, is when cost of certain materials and certain designs just can't be afforded.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. Right now I'm not overreacting, because I'm not sure these tariffs will last, that they'll go in place and last very long to be impactful. But we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
it'll take too long for us to build a bunch of steel factories thinking that we can do it ourselves.
Yeah. No, that ain't happening. I mean, that's not happening. They've had the corner on that market for so long. They've got it down pat. And even if to pay a tariff, it might even be cheaper than us creating a steel factory. I don't know. Pittsburgh people who are listening, sorry. But I don't know. I mean, do we even have steel factories anymore? It's so funny how I tell people how much I don't know about the world, but do we have steel factories?
There is some steel made in the U.S., but I couldn't name exactly where and all those things, but we import a lot of steel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a huge amount. And obviously the guy knows what he's doing, right? He's taking the one thing that he has in his back pocket, which is the U.S. market and the U.S. economy, and using it as a leverage, which, right. Okay. All right. So could it be posturing? Sure. Could he? I think he would totally stick with it guess who he picked on first? He picked on the countries that had no, way to so just to prove a point that he actually would stick with it, right? Yeah. Let's pick on Canada and Mexico, just okay, it's a strategy. All right.
You gotta like the Gulf of America. I like that. I like that one.
Did you see that Google changed it on the maps? It's now because it was mandated by the president of the United States, and everybody uses Google.
I live in Naples now. I'm on the Gulf of America.
You're on the Gulf of America. That is just hilarious to me. And the funny thing is that the world uses Google, and we own in the Google's in the U.S., so it's easy to rename stuff. Okay, Google, change this. I'm like, wow. That is crazy. We are in the Gulf of America. How easy was that?
Well, the other is our office is in Milwaukee, and I'm looking out at the lake right now. I don't know what the name of that lake is. It used to be Lake Michigan, but Illinois says it's going to be Lake Illinois. So I don't know what the name of that lake's going to be.
It should be Lake Wisconsin.
We could just call it whatever the shoreline
is. Whatever you want to call it. They're going to call it some, I don't know. Yeah. They're going to come up with something that's, not a state. But that's hilarious. That's too funny. I did not know they were doing that. That is too funny.
Oh, no. The governor of Illinois wants to change the name to
Like in Illinois?
Yeah, like Illinois.
Ah, that's pretty good. That's just maybe that's a little snub in that direction.
It is. It is.
That's too funny. That's crazy. So we have a couple of other things I guess we wanted to talk about. So all right, Robert Kennedy. Oh Lord. Is he just is he good or bad for healthcare real estate?
Remember, we're talking about real estate.
I know. Is he good or bad for healthcare real estate?
I don't.
I like to get.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters really. Right. I think to the extent it is not shutting down research of any kind that is in life science buildings.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have an impact. Now, if by stopping, let's just say, various research projects or the development of vaccines or anything like that, and shuts that down so that the companies and the researchers are not doing that in life science buildings, that has an impact.
Right.
It may also have an impact on private equity and the investments going in to life science on the research side, where they may be worried that something's going to change and they won't invest. That would have an impact on life science research. On the medical side, at this point, I don't see how it impacts outpatient medical buildings. I can't see that. If anything, it's brought probably an awareness about various things in the medical field, but I don't think it impacts the real estate.
Obviously you're just medical office buildings, they're just in charge of providing care, and that's all they're going to do. And that's the thing. But don't you think over time, if there's a reorganization of how medical innovation happens in the US, that might eventually, is there a long-term impact?
We're talking really long-term. If there is an impact that slows down innovation or stops it for various reasons, it will impact outpatient care, because that is where innovation has really made a significant impact in the last 10 to 15 years. We are seeing things change and the ability to care for patients in a totally different way in the outpatient setting because of all the innovation in equipment and instruments and all kinds of things. If it impacts that, I think then it could, but I don't see that happening right now. But if it does, it will impact development of medical buildings.
All right. It's interesting. Well, so what do you think if that is, they're doing some,
are they mowing around your building?
They're like, it sounds like they're working upstairs in my office building. What the hell? All right, y'all. I don't know, but it's crazy town. They're doing something up there. I don't know. Real estate people.
Okay.
What are you doing? Okay. Well, cool. So what do you think is, as far as for you and what you're building next, what are you trying to achieve this year? Are y'all going to go gangbusters this year? What are you thinking? Yeah.
We will develop a significant number of buildings. A couple of them are orthopedic oriented, with again, and that's not unusual with all of the technology taking orthopedic procedures out of the hospital into the outpatient setting. And the other is really moving just other levels of care to the outpatient setting in buildings. Buildings are really bigger. There is the consolidating of smaller buildings into one to get some efficiencies. Our buildings are going to be in the 60 to 80,000 square feet or larger. And they're with health systems that have good credit. which speaks well going forward.
Makes it easier when your tenant's got good credit, right? That's always helpful. That's always helpful.
But we'll see what happens to interest rates.
Yeah.
The Fed, all of those things, because it looks like we may be going the other way now with inflation and all. So who knows? I mean, it's up and down.
It is. It is up and down for sure. I think, but obviously the price of care hasn't stopped anybody from going to the hospital. So, that's good news. And then, so on the life science side, I mean, we talked about it a couple of times, but life sciences has not been doing well already. I mean, it's not.
Right. There's a lot of vacancy. You've had all this new development over the last 5 years is coming to the market. Yeah. Buildings are vacant.
Yeah.
We've got to weather a storm of filling those buildings up over time and not build anymore. I mean, that's what happens when it's hot, it's hot. And then it gets real cold, and meaning they're vacant. And that's where we are.
Yeah, except for San Diego, which apparently tends to be a life sciences hub, right? That always does.
But a lot of these smaller markets that thought they could get into life science, those buildings are vacant. It's tough. It's really tough. I think one thing that's going to help, depending on what happens to grants and all that, is the universities and large health systems taking an active role in research in the life science buildings, whether they fill up vacant space or whether they start doing it in their own buildings. I think that's going to make up the difference of the companies that have downsized or not doing as much in the life science world. I think we'll see the universities and health systems get into that.
All right. I heard them put their tool down upstairs. So
there you go.
They're grinding, doing something up there. It's so funny. I hear tools. I used to be a general contractor, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, they're either grinding on the floor. I'm guessing based off the sound of the tool, what's happening upstairs. Like, what the heck is going on? Crazy town. All right. Well, very cool. Well, since they're not going to slow down and it'll be very noisy, I think we should call it a day, Dee.
All right. It's been fun.
Fun. All right. Well, this has been the Healthcare Real Estate Show with my host and co-host. You're a co-host now. I promoted you, Dee. You're a co-host now. For this week, and it's been fun. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right.
All right. See
you.
ya.
Take care. Bye.